If you go through the experience of Rosh Hashanah, how it feels, it's not consistent. There isn't a single tenor to the experience of Rosh Hashanah. You start in the evening with a prayer service, which is not very long, hour. And it's clearly serious, but people are in generally good mood. And after it's over, they wish each other a good year. People are smiling and happy. You go home and you have a festive meal with good food, good drink, company, song, words of Torah. There's a relaxed, happy atmosphere. Come to shul the next morning. First of all, it's a marathon. It may go on for 6 hours. And the prayers are much more serious. Some of them are quite serious. Talk about possible futures, not all of which are equally happy, positive, optimistic. Blowing the shofar, which you can tell from the attitude of the congregation, is a very serious business. And you come to Musaf. Musaf is a very long prayer, and it's global in its scope, from the creation to the end of the world. And different dynamics, in particular what's going to happen in the coming year. Repetition of the reader goes through some poetry which is really quite detailed and explicit about the dangers of the coming year. And people are in a very serious, to a certain extent, apprehensive, worried, panicked mood. Some people are crying. Prayers are over. People walk out, smiles on their faces, wishing each other a good year. It's another feast, good food, good drink, songs, very happy presentation. Then, on the first day, there's a ceremony in visible sight of some body of water, if you have one in your vicinity. Otherwise, people do it during the intermediary days before Yom Kippur. But there's a symbolic sloughing off of the transgressions of the past year. It doesn't have a consistent tenor. It varies between relaxed happiness on the one hand and worried, fearful anticipation of possible disasters in the coming year. Now, how can you have a single day that's experienced in such contradictory ways? I think we would expect that a day has a theme. Different holidays each have different themes. They're dedicated to different principles, different pieces of Jewish history, different experiences. Pesach is Liberation Day, freedom. Shavuot celebrates receiving the Torah at Sinai. Sukkot is God's providence as we went through the wilderness. Here you have a day which, on the experiential level, varies between two poles, and it's not obvious why that should be. The truth is there is a theme, but it's a complex theme. It's a single theme which is complex. A single theme that has two parts. What I want to do is explain the two parts to you and show you how they fit together logically, and then we'll come back and see how it's expressed in the experiences that we described and what moral we should derive from it. The fact that there are two themes is expressed by a prayer which is very, very familiar, and that's the Avinu Malkeinu prayer, Our Father, Our King. That prayer we say on all the fast days of the year, all but one, and it's well known. The phrase Avinu Malkeinu, Our Father, Our King, appears elsewhere in the prayers, Every day in the Shemona Esrei, we say it. It's always in that order, always. It is never reversed. It's never our King, our Father. It's always our Father, our King. And that tells a very important story. Rosh Hashanah, the 10 days through Yom Kippur, the emphasis is on God being King. Indeed, at one point we changed the prayers. Instead of saying the Holy God, we say the Holy King, HaMelech HaKadosh. What we have to understand is that King is a role that God plays. It's a role. But it's not, so to speak, his essential role or his essential identity for us. His essential identity for us is Father. He's Father playing the role of King. That's very different from King. A father is a relationship of love, care, commitment, responsibility. Sometimes the strategy by which the father acts out his love and his responsibility is playing the role of king, but he does it as father. Maybe you've heard the term, which about 10 years ago became popular in psychology, tough love. That's exactly what tough love is. The starting point is love. The basis of the relationship is love. But how can I express my love in such a way that it will be beneficial? Sometimes the way to express the love is through toughness. But it's love. It's not just for the sake of justice. It's not just strict fairness. It's not playing by the rules. It's love, which needs this type of presentation under these conditions. This idea of our Father, our King, is absolutely fundamental to Jewish philosophy. There's a famous midrash. The midrash says that God's, so to speak, first thought in creating the world was created with strict justice. But then he saw that it wouldn't stand. You're sort of encouraged naively here to think of a kind of projection. Run a simulation on the computer. The latest Intel chip. And see what's going to happen. 1,000 years, 2,000 years, 3,000 down the road, crash. Well, then that's not a good formula. And God added mercy to the mix so that it would survive. Now, taken literally, that's absolute nonsense. God doesn't need to run simulations. God doesn't make mistakes. God's decisions aren't short-sighted. What the Midrash is saying, and by the way, there are many Midrashim like this. What the Midrash is saying is there is a point of view which would lead to this conclusion. There's another point of view which contradicts it and forces a modification. And when the 2 points of view are taken together, the result is X. So there's a point of view from which strict justice would have been right. There's a competing consideration which says no. And therefore, the result is a kind of compromise. It's not first, second, and third in time. It's logically what principles are being used. One way you could see this is to go back to through the Midrash again and ask a very radical question. God first thought to create the world with strict justice. Well, if that's what he first thought, then that's got to be right. God doesn't make mistakes, doesn't need second thoughts. Now he saw that the world won't stand. So why doesn't he just give it up? Give it up. The world demands a definition in terms of strict justice. It's not going to stand. Forget it. Do something else. Meditate. I don't know. Give it up. Where do the resources come from to say, oh, it won't stand this way? Then I'll shift the perspective and I'll shift the formula to something else so it will stand. Obviously, the thought of creating the world with strict justice is a second thought, not a first thought. It's not the origin. It's not the top priority. There's a hidden top priority, Q. That top priority, Q, leads to the idea of a world of strict justice. But then when the world crashes, Q reasserts itself and says, well, I'm not interested in a crash. I'm interested in a world that survives. So instead of creating the world with strict justice, which would have been a kind of pure expression of Q, Q expresses itself in a more complex way to add in mercy so that the world will survive. The key insight is to see that strict justice is the vice president, not the president. Strict justice is the vice president. And if the vice president's activity are going to lead to bankruptcy for the company, then the president will call him in and say, excuse me, that was not the intention. The intention was that the company should flourish, not go bankrupt, and therefore your activity has to be changed, modified. But you can only do that if the strict justice is the vice president. If you thought that the strict justice were the absolute ideal and it was the starting point and the ultimate motivation, there'd be no place, no leverage from which to change it. And the answer is that the president is loving kindness. The world was created to express loving kindness. Loving kindness is the only purpose of the entire creation. That's all. Everything that gets in under loving kindness. It's a means to loving kindness or expression of loving kindness. Everything that we see in the world, all the things that are in the world, all the events that take place, all the qualities with which God deals with the world, all of them must be traced back to loving kindness. Otherwise, we don't understand it. This, if you've probably heard the name of the book, The Way of God by Lutzato, that's the project of that book. He starts off in chapter 1 by saying that God created the world in order to show loving kindness, in order to benefit, in order to give good. And then he traces the entire creation, the whole history of the world, back to that root. So now, let's follow the logic of the Midrash through. Why would strict justice have been the first application of loving kindness, the first thought, so to speak, the most natural derivative of loving kindness? What do loving kindness on the one hand and strict justice on the other hand have to do with one another? Indeed, it's worse than that. Have to do with one another. Don't they contradict one another? Let's suppose I want to show someone that I love him. What do you think of the following method of showing him that I love him? I call him in and I say, I have a job that needs to be done. Here's the contract. $50 an hour, 40 hours a week, 3 years. Here's the contract. And I pay him per hour. He works 6 hours. He gets $300. 10 hours, $500. That's how I pay him. Am I showing him that I love him? Not at all. I gave him a job. We signed a contract. He's working and I'm paying him. That's not love. How do I show somebody that I love him? I give him something that he hasn't earned, something he hasn't got a right to, something he can't demand from me, something I don't owe him. Give somebody a present that I don't owe him, then I can show him that I care about him, that I have feelings for him. So that means in interacting with a person, love and strict justice are at odds with one another. They contradict one another. The interaction can't be an interaction of strict justice and an interaction of love. If it's strict justice, it's specifically not love. Now, I told you, the picture I'm describing is you have loving kindness, and as a consequence, a derivative of loving kindness, you have strict justice. That sounds impossible. It just sounds impossible. If A and B are contradictory, it's very hard to imagine that A implies B, unless A is inconsistent. So I'm speaking to logicians. But if A is consistent, it shouldn't imply something that contradicts it. It's still true, and it's true because we're thinking in too narrow a context. Let me broaden the context for you and then show you how it works. Maimonides, when he codifies the laws of charity, gives 8 levels, 8 different levels of charity, going up the ladder from 1 to 8. Level 7, the next to best way of doing charity, is anonymous. The giver and the recipient should not know one another. Why? Because charity is always a symptom of failure. The person who's receiving charity could not provide for himself. He's dependent. He can't provide for himself. It's best not to confront the person with that sense of failure. If the giver and the receiver don't know each other, then the receiver has no one to be embarrassed in front of. No one knows that he's receiving. And the giver doesn't have any tendency to look down on him or feel sorry for him and treat him as an inferior because he doesn't know who received it. That's the next to best. What's the best? The best, says Maimonides, is giving someone a job. Now, when you hear that, you should think, giving him a job. But look, if I give somebody a job, he does know me. He does know me. What happened to anonymity? And by the way, you probably know that giving somebody a job is a great, great act of charity. When people don't have work, people can't earn money, that it's terribly debilitating. It crushes a person's ego, especially a man. Some women also. Some women's egos are crushed when the husbands can't make money. But it's terribly debilitating. Give a person a job, you're giving him something very precious. But what happened to anonymity? The reason you don't have to have anonymity is because when you give somebody a job, there's no embarrassment. Because at the end of the week, when he walks home with a paycheck, he earned it. He earned it. So he doesn't feel bad about getting it. He's a success. You've made him into a success. You've given him a double gift. He has money to live on, and he has his dignity, he has his self-respect, he has his honor. You've given him a double gift. That's why it's the best form of charity. Any other form of charity, at the very least, makes the person who received the charity feel like a failure. This makes him feel like a success. That's why it's so exquisite. That's why it's the greatest gift. That's why, if I wanted to give charity out of love, and love means I want the best for the person I'm giving the charity to, I'm going to give him a job. Now let's review. What happens when I give him a job? We sign a contract. We sign a contract. $50 an hour, $40 hours a week. Isn't that justice? Sure, but what love motivates here is setting up a relationship of justice, an ongoing, continuous relationship of justice. And that can be the greatest gift of love. A contradiction we will find if there's a single interaction. Either I give you pay or I give you a gift. If I give you pay, it's justice. If I give you a gift, it's love. But if I set up an ongoing, long-term relationship of justice, where you can earn the money that you get at the end of the week, setting up that relationship is an act of love. That's how justice can be born out of love. Wanting to do the best for the person who's in need, you give him a job, in which case you're setting up a relationship of justice, and that way you're giving him the best possible gift. Are we together so far? Okay, but now suppose we do that. Suppose we imagine that as a kind of global policy. My example is George Soros. I don't know if you've heard of George Soros, but he's a fabulously wealthy Jew with, unfortunately, lots of wrong ideas in his head. George Soros is so wealthy that when there are whole countries in danger of bankruptcy, he can go in and bail them out. And he does that from time to time. Bails out countries. He's got a lot of money. Now imagine George Soros saying, oh, I heard this fascinating tape by somebody named Gottlieb. I'm sure he's not a rabbi because I don't listen to rabbis. But he's somebody, I think he had a philosophical background. And he said the best gift you can give anybody is by giving him a job. And Watts, California, that sector of Los Angeles, which is desperately underprivileged. So Soros comes in and he says, I'm setting aside $250 million, which is yesterday's spare change, and I'm setting up a job corps for Watts, California. Anybody who wants a job, we'll give them a productive job, 40 hours a week, good pay, job benefits. That's how I'm going to help the people of Watts, California. How satisfactory is that going to be? How successful is it going to be? It's going to have very little success because the vast majority of people in Watts, California can't hold a job. They can't hold a job. They don't have work skills. They don't have work habits. They don't have a work ethic. Many of them are on drugs, alcohol. Many of them have psychological problems. What they need is a massive rehabilitation program. Yes, maybe there's 10% to whom you could give jobs and give them the ideal outcome right away. The rest need rehabilitation. Rehabilitation is going to be straight charity. They're not going to earn it. But that's what they need. They can't make it without it. Here you have a conflict between quality and quantity. If you insist on the highest quality gift, which is a gift of setting up a relationship of justice, a job, then very few people are going to make it. The motivator at the top of the branch is loving kindness. Loving kindness will not tolerate so limited an effect, so few who are going to benefit. So loving kindness reasserts itself and says, okay, if loving kindness is going to give birth to a procedure whereby the gift is top quality, then the quantity is going to be very small. So what we need is a mixed strategy. The top quality should be available for that small group that can take it and benefit from it. And a lower quality, where more of it is a gift, more of it is unearned, more of it is a pure gift, will be available for those who can't earn it. And it'll be a sliding scale, depending upon the person's capability to earn. So, what happens is, loving kindness expresses itself twice. First time, as a motivator for high quality, and second time, as a motivator for spreading the quantity by tolerating a mixed strategy with lower quality. And it's not first, second, and third in time. It's that you have to know what the principles are and how they affect the outcome. And that's what the Midrash is talking about. First thought, that is to say, the direct application of loving kindness is strict justice, and then the secondary application is adding mercy. So this is the same pattern of Avinu Malkeinu, our Father, our King. Father is the first essential relationship, and King is something that God acts out as a role when maximizing the amount of kindness that you can do requires it. And sometimes it's acted out straight because some people can take it. And so they get the highest possible gift. And other times it's acted out less. There are many more applications of this idea. I want to go back to Rosh Hashanah and explain what I started with. I'll stop and take questions, and then, if we have time, I'll show you some of the other applications. It's a very deep and far-reaching idea. None of what I'm telling you is mine. I'm just putting things together from various places. I just made the structure because one of the things that I do as a philosopher, but I don't think any of the ideas are original with me. We're going into Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah is a day on which serious consequences are decided for the coming year. The last year's performance is judged and evaluated, and decisions are made for the coming year. That's serious business. Did anyone dream last Rosh Hashanah that there would be a war in this country this summer? That 72 Jews would be killed? Did we know what we were thinking about, what we were anticipating, what the stakes were for the coming year? And as it is, this was the outcome. The outcome could have been very different, both more positive and more negative. If we hadn't discovered the tunnels, as some people have pointed out, if the 3 boys had not been killed, and that triggered the war, and discovered the tunnels, they had a plan for a massive attack on Rosh Hashanah. 32 tunnels erupting simultaneously, taking control of the Yishuvim, taking women and children as hostages back into the tunnels. What would we have done then? What would we have done? Bomb the tunnels with dozens of hostages there? How would we have negotiated? What would we have done? As it was, they lost their infrastructure. So we're coming to a day in which there are consequences, evaluations, and very serious. But who's doing it? Avinu is doing it. Our Father is doing it. And He's doing it only for the sake of our good. So underlying the trepidation of anticipating the consequences is the confidence that whatever they are, ultimately, they're for our good. It's a little bit like, I'm not wishing this to anybody, but it's a little like going to the surgeon, and he does a workup, X-rays, MRIs, and all the rest, and then he says, look, this and this is the problem, these and these are the approaches, this is how we have to handle it. If certain things happen, then maybe this will have to be cut out, that will have to be cut out. There may be partial loss of function of this, loss of function of that, but you'll live. You'll live, and it won't get worse. It won't get worse. The way you're standing now, if you do nothing, it'll get worse. And if we do the surgery, it won't get worse. Now you're hearing the surgery. Surgery is frightening. Surgery is serious. Has consequences. But the surgeon is dedicated to making you healthy. As healthy as you can possibly be. So you don't go in with the feeling of being attacked or feeling of a cold, impersonal judge. Get it or don't get it? By the way, what is the symbol in statuary for justice in the Western world? It really comes from Greece. That's right. I don't remember why it's a woman. She's holding scales and she's blindfolded. Why is she blindfolded? It makes no difference who you are. What gets evaluated is your action. You stole, you cheated, you misrepresented, you hurt somebody. These are the payments that have to be made. These are the consequences of what you did. Who you are makes no difference whatsoever. That's not our concept of justice. That would be a king who isn't your father. But a king who's your father? He's taking you into account. He wants this to work for you. He wants this to be the best for you. Knowing that, we have a double expression of Rosh Hashanah. There's an expression of confidence, of happiness, because what I'm going into is a certain interaction with my Father, who loves me and cares about me. Yes, there's a period of time in which these decisions are being made, and they may be decisions that hurt. Surgery also hurts. But in the end, it's for your own good. And by someone who loves you, someone who cares about you. And that's why you can have the trepidation, hearing the shofar blown, musaf prayers, trepidation of the coming year, together with the happiness of the meals and the confidence of the meals. The Midrash says that a Jew takes a haircut, goes to the bath, dresses in his holiday finest for the day of judgment. That's not a person who's afraid of getting his, I won't say it, it's too painful nowadays, getting a negative judgment on the day of judgment. We'll go in sackcloth and ashes and wailing and weeping and pleading for his life. No. Because, as I said, we're going before the one who's our Father, before, more fundamentally, than being our King. Are we together? Yeah, so far? Okay. Now, this idea of our Father, our King, that justice comes first, loving kindness comes first, and justice comes afterwards, has a number of other applications. One other application on Rosh Hashanah. The main prayer, the main subject of prayer in Rosh Hashanah is mercy. One might have thought, this is a day of judgment. You're coming before the king to be judged. It's a day of judgment, the time of mercy. How can you appeal to mercy? It's the wrong subject. Indeed, in our courts, when do you make an appeal for mercy? When is it relevant to ask the court for mercy? Huh? When you're guilty. After you've been judged guilty. Before you've been judged guilty, if you think you're innocent, you don't want mercy. You want justice. I want to be declared innocent because I'm innocent. If you lose the case, then you're stuck. Once it's been declared that you're guilty, and you accept the fact that you're at least judged guilty, then you ask for mercy. The day of judgment, when the judgment is going on, seems like it's the wrong time to ask for mercy. If you think of the heavenly powers that are operating, strict judgment is operating. How does mercy apply to strict judgment? The answer is, if it was strict judgment all by itself, mercy wouldn't apply. Mercy wouldn't apply. Because mercy is always a contradiction to strict justice. I'm telling you now, it was not well known. I heard it on a tape by Rabbi Gottlieb, who was the mashgiach in Baltimore before I got there in 1969. But I think it was a brilliant idea. Mercy is always a contradiction to strict justice. Just as he said, you appealed for mercy after the verdict of guilty. Why are you appealing for mercy? Because guilty means 20 years in jail. When I ask for mercy, what am I asking? Don't do what the verdict says. Don't do what the verdict says. I'm a first-time offender. I have a good support system. I have the physical frailties, and jail will kill me. I have all sorts of reasons why I don't want you to carry out the sentence of strict justice. Mercy always opposes strict justice. Now just imagine this as a contest. Strict justice says 20 years in jail. And I say, no, Strict justice says, no? Who are you? What do you mean, no? Strict justice is a moral imperative. Who are you to say no? My only leverage is I can appeal over the head of strict justice. I can go up a level. I can say to strict justice, I remember seeing the nameplate on the door of your office. And if I remember correctly, it said, Vice President. Not President, but Vice President. Aha! That's all you are. You're a Vice President. Well, around the corner is the office of the President. That's the office of loving kindness. And I'm appealing to loving kindness over your head. Now, what about the idea, but that today is the day of strict justice? Answer, nothing is independent of loving kindness. Loving kindness is the purpose of the entire creation. Everything in the creation exists only because it traces back to loving kindness. There can't be a day, an item, a thought, an idea, a principle of Q cut off from loving kindness. There can't be any such thing because Q wouldn't exist if loving kindness didn't motivate it, if loving kindness didn't demand it. So whenever you're dealing with any Q, you can always say, Q, okay, fine, but loving kindness. Because loving kindness is behind everything. So even on the day of strict justice, loving kindness is relevant. There couldn't be a day of strict justice unless loving kindness wanted it. So on the day of loving kindness, I can appeal over the head of justice to loving kindness, and loving kindness can say to justice, yes, I created you, I put you in place for a certain purpose, but at this point, you're too strong, you're too strict, and you'll contradict my overall plan for maximizing loving kindness, and therefore I'm going to restrict you, I'm going to hold you back, modify you, delay you, and if you want a source for this, you can look at The Way of God by Luzzatto, Part 2, Chapter 8, where he says the words I'm telling you now, word for word, plus some more that I'm not going into at the moment. So that's why an appeal for mercy on Rosh Hashanah is appropriate as an appeal, even though it's the day of strict justice, because strict justice is itself an offshoot of loving kindness. Yeah.
Are we starting with mercy because we assumed that by strict justice we wouldn't make it?
Very interesting. The great leaders of the Jewish people, Jacob in particular, said, was an enormous, tzaddik, holy, pure servant of God. But when he asked for something, he asked for it as a free gift. He did not trade on his own merit. He did not assume that he had earned it and deserved it. So we follow in their footsteps. It's not up to me to keep God's books. It's hidden from me, not only that, but I'm not objective looking at myself. I'm full of rationalizations and hopes and fears. I don't see myself objectively. I have to assume that I'm not deserving of it, and I have to assume, therefore, I have to ask for it on the basis of mercy. Could be that I'm too down on myself. It could be that I do really deserve it, but I can't assume that. So you're right. The basic appeal is an appeal for mercy. We have a phrase in the Siddur, the next to last blessing. If you look at it carefully, think about it logically, it's really quite puzzling. Hatov kilo chalu rachamecha, amarachem kilo samu chasadecha. I'll translate it literally, then I'll connect a few concepts, and then I'll explain it. You are the good one, for your mercies have not run out. You are the merciful one, for your loving kindnesses have not run out. You're good because of the mercies, and you're merciful because of the loving kindness. Now, good and loving kindness are almost synonyms in our language. So, if I put it consistently in one terminology, it would be, you are the one of loving kindness because of your mercies, and you're merciful because of your loving kindnesses. Golly, why do it that way? Why not say that you are the one of loving kindness because of your loving kindnesses, and you're the merciful one because of your mercies? Why cross the wires? because the phraseology of the siddur there is telling us two very profound things. God is the one of loving kindness, of goodness. And his loving kindness goes so far that not only does it dictate the highest quality of good, but it also makes room for lesser quality of good so as to maximize the extent of the good. And that's mercy. You are the being of loving kindness even to the extent of practicing mercy. That's the first half. That's not obvious. And you're the merciful one. Mercy can come from many different sources. I don't mean to apply to anybody here, and I hope that it doesn't apply to anybody here, but there was a phrase that was used by conservatives referring to a certain political group called a bleeding heart liberal. And the idea of a bleeding heart liberal was, I see somebody in pain, I just got to give him money. He's in pain. He's suffering. I can't leave him like that. I've got to give him money. Without thinking, yeah, but suppose he becomes dependent upon you. Suppose instead of learning a trade and becoming independent, he becomes to just rely on your handouts and so forth and so on. What about the long term? What about alternatives? No, he's in pain. So if he's in pain, I'm in pain. So in pain, I hand it out. There are lots of things that can motivate mercy. The prayer is telling you that what motivates mercy in our case is loving kindness, not bleeding heart mercy. Not I can't stand to see people in pain. What motivates mercy is an investment in the person's long-term development, his long-term benefit. That's the way in which the mercy is originated. And those two then become very rich statements. Together so far? And there's one more application which I think is very important, and that's in the Shema. We have various names for God. According to the Talmud, each of these names refers to some type of relationship that God has with the world. That's the Talmudic tip of the Kabbalistic iceberg. There's a gigantic amount of Kabbalah on that subject, and the Talmud refers to it, as it does often, refers to Kabbalistic themes with a kind of passing light touch, and the unsuspecting reader doesn't notice anything going on. When you then read some of the Kabbalistic works, you go back and say, aha, that's what they were doing. Just didn't, wave a flag and tell you that that's what it was about. The name that's spelled Yud and a Hey and a Vav and a Hey, so to speak, God's proper name, is associated with the quality of mercy. Associated with the quality of mercy. That's not obvious. Because the name Yud and a Hey and a Vav and a Hey, says the Ramban, is the name that describes God as the source of existence for the whole universe. The root of that name is Hoveh. Hoveh in Hebrew means to be. So he's the source of existence for the whole universe. In our modern terminology, that means he's the creator. He makes everything be. Well, I thought for many years, what quality, what relationship is behind the creation? I just told you about 16 times, loving kindness. And we said, loving kindness and mercy aren't the same quality. They're different qualities. They're connected. One's related to the other, but they aren't the same quality. Why would the quality associated with the four-letter proper name, which is the name of God as creator, why would it be mercy instead of loving kindness? It really ought to be loving kindness. That was mysterious to me for many years. It just doesn't fit. It doesn't fit all the background that I know. But what I told you already solves this problem. We just have to look at it in a little more detail, a little more precision. Actually, what I told you already solves this problem. Let's go back to that midrash and watch the procedure again. Loving kindness says, I want to give the highest quality gift. It turns out that only a very few will receive it. The quantity will be too restricted, very much restricted. So, loving kindness says, listen carefully, loving kindness says, I'm going to introduce mercy as a way of expanding the quantity of the gift, because mercy will allow me to give even when it's not completely earned. So now, what exactly is mercy? Mercy is loving kindness second time round. That's what it is. It's a second application of loving kindness. As we said, that mercy is fighting an uphill battle against justice, and mercy is appealing over the head of justice to loving kindness. That is to say, mercy is loving kindness second time round. Again, loving kindness says top quality, strict justice. Then loving kindness says, but the extent of the gift is going to be too small. Since it's going to be too small, I, loving kindness, can't tolerate that. So I, loving kindness, am going to restrict justice, hold it back, modify it, weaken it. That's the uphill battle against strict justice. That's what we call mercy. Mercy is loving kindness second time round. So already half the gap is covered. It isn't as if loving kindness over here, mercy over there, I got a name for the creation, I know the creation comes with loving kindness, and shock, surprise, astonishment, we call it mercy. You know, like apples and sand. No, it's Macintosh apples and delicious apples. They're very close to one another. Still, you now have two applications of loving kindness. The first that generates strict justice, and the second that modifies strict justice in the direction of maximizing the quantity of the gift. Why is it the second application of loving kindness that's associated with the name of God rather than the first? I no longer have a problem when the tradition says loving kindness, because there will be second loving kindness number 2 instead of loving kindness number 1. But we're left with a query, not a kasha, not an objection, but a query. Why is it loving kindness number 2 rather than loving kindness number 1? I think the answer is this. Well, okay, appreciation, but I have to define exactly appreciation for what. Let's go back and personify loving kindness again. Loving kindness says, I want to give a gift, I want it to be a top quality gift, strict justice. Now, there's a projection. In the projection, there will be a lot of people. There are a lot of people. And as long as the project is run in terms of strict justice, very many of them aren't going to make it. They aren't going to make it. And that's where God says, but I don't want you to be lost. I don't want you to be lost. You. I'm committed to you. I want you to succeed. That's what mercy does. Mercy is the expression of God's care and commitment for the individual. Not for the class of people, not for the quality of the project, which the first application is. I don't mean to belittle it. It's very important. But mercy, which is loving kindness, sub 2, the second application of loving kindness, is commitment to the individual. And I think the word in Hebrew is chesed. We translate it loving kindness. I think in the translation loving kindness, when you have the second application, the word loving is much stronger. It's because of love of the individual. I don't want you to fail. God is sometimes described as Savior. That means, I'm drowning. I have no way out. I have no powers to save myself. And God saves me because He doesn't want me to fail. That's the loving kindness that the tradition associates with the name of God as Creator. What we have to know is that God, as Creator, does so out of a care and concern for each and every one of us. Together so far? Now in the Shema, you have an exquisite expression of this. Because the Shema starts with 6 words. Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. Roughly, there's an infinity of material packed in here, and we do it from time to time. I can't do it tonight. At any rate, Hashem Echad is something like a statement of monotheism, and that Hashem there is the Yud and the Hey and the Vav and the Hey. It's that proper name of God. 1. The next word is, you shall love God. And the careful reader says, why is that? Why is that? Because God is 1, I should love Him. And if there were 16, I couldn't love all 16. And 1 must definitely be the object of love? I mean, how do you get from Hashem Echad, that Hashem is one, to you shall love God? Well, what's the connection? Given what I've told you, the connection is pretty clear, yeah.
And maybe you could say that you should love him like you love yourself, like we're called, but we're one with Hashem. We're all one thing, and therefore we should love him even more so than we love us. I'm saying we should strive for that.
Well, we will have to talk about this at some length. I don't think we can make any literal sense out of being part of God or being one with God. God is creator and we are created. God is infinite and we are finite. God is certainly not physical at all. Not even parts of him are physical. Well, but the soul is a creature, created ex nihilo, out of nothing, just as much as the material world is created ex nihilo, out of nothing, just as much as the angels are created ex nihilo, out of nothing. And when the tradition uses the phrase "Chelek Elokam Imal," the soul is a piece of God on high, one should not be encouraged to think of God as a salami that you can slice into pieces. You know, there's this piece, and this piece, and this piece. That's a metaphor. It's a poetry, and it's meant to communicate a certain idea. But strictly speaking, the gulf between creator and creature is an infinite gulf. To speak of being part of God and so on and so on is just not appropriate. There are phrases like that, and they have to be understood. Let me put it. Just take 2 minutes for a commercial here, because I find a certain prejudice that some people have that needs to be put on the table. In the Tanakh, the Hebrew Bible, God is described as having arms and legs and head and eyes and ears and shoulders, and we say, "Oh, of course, that's not meant literally. Of course not. God isn't a physical body. It's to describe qualities, actions, powers, or something. It's not meant literally. And we all take that for granted, of course." Then people see statements in the Talmud, or they see statements quoted from the Zohar, and it says, there's no place empty of him, for the soul is a piece of God on high, and they take that absolutely literally. And they do not tolerate any budging from the literal dictionary meaning of each word. Why? Why would I have one attitude towards the written scriptures on the one hand, and on the other hand, the oral sources? Indeed, if anything, the rabbis who memorized the entire written scriptures would be affected by the style of the written scriptures and adopt the same style for themselves. No reason whatsoever to think that the rabbis, every word was literal, when the written scriptures, the source of all our literature and all of the divine injection into us, is not that way. And in fact, the rabbis say over and over again that they don't speak always in a literal fashion. So I'm just cautioning you that the idea that we are part of God, and he's part of us, and he fills the room and the table and so forth and so on, and there's nothing but God and so forth and so on, it's not going to wash. It's not going to wash. Not in philosophical sources, not in Kabbalistic sources, it's not going to wash. But I think the answer to my question is much simpler, and it's much more on the surface. Can you be told to love someone? Can you command love? That's a whole subject. There's a whole literature on that. But at the very least, if someone shows love to me, it's very natural for me to respond with love. That's very natural. It's a little bit like, I don't know if you've ever been told this, but you can try this as an experiment. If you smile at someone, it's almost impossible not to smile back. They can be in a lousy mood and they walk up with a big smile on your face. The smile breaks through, sometimes they're embarrassed. They don't want to smile. I know, because sometimes when I'm upset and my wife smiles at me or laughs, and then I can't maintain it. I just can't maintain it. I can't keep it up. She breaks it that way. Smile and the whole world smiles with you. Cry and you cry alone, or frown, you frown alone. Right? But it's true. Try it some morning. Well, they say, "Hello, how are you?" Right? See the person's frown. See how long you keep the frown up when you greet him that way. Love is that way for sure. Like the Chazal say, "K'mayim panim el panim." I think maybe it's a verse. Like when you look in the water, you see reflection. When you show love, so God is showing love. That's Hashem Echad. Hashem is the name of God which describes him as the one who creates the world out of mercy. What is mercy? Mercy is the second application of loving kindness, where he says, "I care about you. I want you to succeed. I'm going to lower the standard so as to make sure that you also will be able to succeed. That's love. So when I say Hashem Echad, what I should meditate on is the fact that God loves me. Then to say I should love Him is a natural thing. If I can feel His love for me, it's natural for me to be told to respond in love to Him. I think you can see that this idea of Avinu Malkeinu, our Father, our King, that God is fundamentally Father, that loving kindness is the source of the whole creation, is a gigantic subject. And its relationship to strict justice is one of the fundamental ideas of the Jewish philosophy and of Jewish mysticism. And what you've got tonight is at least a scratching of the surface, and it applies to Rosh Hashanah in the ways that we said it applies in spades. Okay? Question?
I'm wondering, when we were speaking about the Midrash, and God just wanted to create the din, right? So we said really there's something about din, which is the loving kindness. So why was it necessary to say the Midrash in that way?
I don't know the word necessary. The Midrash is communicating to certain people, and it wants to communicate a particular idea. It doesn't want necessarily to fight several battles at the same time. Similarly, the Midrash often says, this was created before the creation. Oh, yeah? It was created at a time when nothing was created? Try that again. Wouldn't mind if it made sense rather than just talk nonsense. Right? You can't create something before the creation. It means its purpose is so fundamental that the whole creation depends upon it. It's not a chronological statement, it's a logical statement. It's a statement of logical priorities. Right? And you have to get used to the fact that that's the way Chazal express themselves. Yeah.
The same thing when they say that God looked into the Torah, then He created the world. Did He really look into the Torah and then create the world?
Good. That's a good point. God did not have a piece of parchment with ink marks on it, and He opened up the scroll and so on and so on. The Torah is the record of God's ultimate intentions in the creation, and it's a plan. It's a plan that has a structure. This is part of another very fundamental principle. The way God created the world is so that we'd be able to understand it. So He, so to speak, limited Himself to acting according to certain principles. He's infinite. He doesn't need principles. Everything He does could come out of His infinity, and then it would just be totally unintelligible to us. He created us with minds, and He wants our minds to grasp what He's doing. So He, so to speak, on His own, limits Himself to operate according to the principles that our minds are created to grasp. Now, so that means looking into the Torah is the picture of an architect. Because an architect's plan, and he tells the contractor, put the concrete there, put the wood there, put the glass there, because he has a plan. He's operating according to the plan. Since there's a plan, it's possible for someone who has access to the plan to know how the world was created, what its fundamental principles are. The Torah is that plan. When we study the Torah, we're getting access to that kind of information. But there, when he looked into the Torah, it doesn't mean the scroll. It means he had this plan, and he operated according to the plan. Very good. Okay.